Today is going to be a beginner's guide to natural language processing. I'm going to go to the agenda in just a little bit. Let me just quickly introduce myself. So Nish already said most of it. So I have a day job, and my day job is being a solutions architect for AI machine learning at Amazon Web Services, AWS. And then because, that's not enough to do, I also do various things at night. So Nish already mentioned the platform, meetup platform that I'm leading, NLP London, where we get together NLP enthusiasts here in London. I've also been volunteering with DataKind for almost 6 years now, hard to believe. And I do various projects with customers through my company AI ML Consulting. So today I really want to share some of my knowledge on how to get started with natural language processing. So I'm going to quickly elaborate on the rise of NLP in the past few years. And we will see some examples how companies, enterprises use NLP. And then we also going to have a look, well, what can we learn from the enterprises and how can the social sector actually use NLP? And then we're going to go into some demos and there will be some coding. The point of the coding, though, is not to overwhelm you, but quite the opposite, to show how easy it is nowadays to use NLP with just a few lines of code. So we're going to have a demo on sentiment analysis. So that usually answers a question: how do people feel about my product or my service? You get customer comments, reviews. How can you go about digesting all these reviews and comments and find out whether they talk good things about my service or bad things? How can I extract information from a document is the second demo we're going to be looking at. So imagine you have a long document like a contract. How can I extract some information from that document? And lastly, we're going to look at translation. So if I have a French document or a German document, how can I translate to English and back? We're also going to have a quick look at ethics and biases in natural language processing. The point being, all these AI models in natural language processing have usually been trained on some sort of text scraped from the internet. And because we live in a biased society, these models are also biased because they learn from our biases. So we're going to see a little bit what that means and how to be aware of it. And then if we do have time, we're going to have maybe a quick glimpse into the future. So around 10 days ago, a company called OpenAI released a new AI model called ChatGPT. And it's been blowing up a little bit on Twitter and social media. People are quite obsessed about it. So if we do have time, we're going to do a bonus demo and look at that as well. But my key takeaway for all of you today is natural language processing is more accessible than it's ever been. And I would love for you to get started today, like try it out, play around with it, and see if you come up with some ideas how to use it in your organization. All right, so with that being out of the way, I'm gonna first go into the rise of NLP. So NLP has seen quite a resurgence in the past few years, past 5 years roughly. That's because there has been some major developments in an AI field called deep learning. There's been some major developments in model architectures, and that has led to a lot of companies now being much more comfortable using natural language processing. So Eli Lilly, for example, has developed Lilly Translate, which is a natural language processing service or tool that helps them to, it's used by 30,000 employees within Eli Lilly, and they use it for real-time translation of Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and just any other text maintaining in a document format. The service is used across the company, including HR, finance, sales, marketing, and so on. And it's been providing extensive time savings, according to the Vice President and Information Officer for Information and Digital Solutions at Eli Lilly. Accenture is using NLP for legal analytics with a tool they called ALICE, Accenture Legal Intelligent Contract Exploration. And ALICE allows Accenture to perform text searches across its over 1 million contracts using word embeddings, which is a fancy word for saying like, basically finding keywords and determine whether a paragraph relates to a particular contract clause type. And the project has significantly reduced the amount of time that attorneys have to spend manually reading these documents. And we have Verizon. Verizon boosted their customer service with NLP. The AI-enabled digital worker that they built reads repair tickets via email and automatically responds to common requests and routes the more complex issues to human engineers. And this technology has saved Verizon nearly 10,000 worker hours per month since Q2 2019, according to Verizon. And then lastly, we have Aetna. Aetna has created an AI application called auto adjudication of complex provider contracts. And basically what they do is the natural language processing system and the database software there is being used together to identify payment attributes and construct additional data that can be then automatically read by the system to settle health insurance claims. And with this technology, Aetna was able to refocus 50 claims adjudication staff on high-level tasks, and it's projected to save the company $6 million in processing and rework costs per year. So these are some of the examples on how enterprises use natural language processing these days, which then begs the question, well, what can the social sector do? I mean, these enterprises, they usually have a lot of resources in order to use machine learning engineers to use natural language processing to their benefits. However, with this rise of natural language processing in the past 5 years, there's been a tremendous rise as well within the open source community. So the social sector can actually harness this power of the open source community to use NLP for their organizations as well. And there's a combination of two factors here that are being provided from the open source community. First, you have these NLP models that are being open sourced and collected in what is called a model hub. And that is literally a website where you can go, and now there are close to 100,000 open source NLP models. And we're going to have a look at that model hub in a second. And you can pick and choose a NLP model that basically fits your needs. And then in order to interact with this model, you would usually require a machine learning or a deep learning engineer. However, there is an open source API that has been developed by a company called Hugging Face. And this API basically enables you to communicate, to interact with these models on a very high level, meaning it usually takes only a few lines of code to actually leverage these NLP models from the Model Hub. So together, with the open source models and the open sourced API, it is very easy and straightforward to at least get started with natural language processing. Okay, so this is where I will try to transition from my slides to my browser. Hope you can all see my browser. I zoomed in quite a bit, but do let me know if you cannot read it. We are now going to do some demos, and I will try to convey how easy it is nowadays to use natural language processing. So the first demo we said is going to be evolving around how do people feel about my service. So that is sentiment analysis, basically. In order to run this open source software, you usually would have to install 2 libraries. Libraries are code extensions that enable you basically to use certain commands within your code. You would need a library called PyTorch or Torch, and a library called Transformers. So that is one command where it just says install these libraries onto my system so I can use them. Once these libraries are installed, the first line you would write is from Transformers import pipeline. What this does is it takes this pipeline API from Transformers, and this pipeline API we can use to create a machine learning model or an object that basically can do sentiment analysis. So I can write sentiment classifier, and this one just going to copy and paste from my notes before I'm going to type something wrong. But basically what's happening here is we're going to create a classifier with this pipeline API. We're going to say text classification because sentiment classification belongs under text classification. So you have a portion of text, which could be a customer review, and you want to classify that text. In our case, it just so happens that we want to classify it into positive or negative, but you can also classify text in other ways. You could think about an article from a newspaper, and a text classifier could look whether this article is a sports article or a politics article, and so on. Now, the second line here is this model. This is one of those open source models that I mentioned from the Model Hub. And how do I know that I need to use this model? Well, in order to know that, I would have to okay, just one second. I'm trying to get this zoom bar, which is in my way of my browser tabs, get away. Yep. Hide video panel. Oh, no. Hide fleeting. Yeah, there we go. So you can go to this Model Hub, and it looks a bit overwhelming in the beginning. On the left-hand side, you have basically these tasks. So there are models on this Model Hub. As I mentioned, close to 100,000 now, and daily there's going to be more models uploaded. And then on the left-hand side, you have the tasks. So there's not only models about natural language processing, but most of them actually are. Now, if I know that I want to do sentiment classification, I can go on to text classification, which I mentioned is the overarching category for sentiment classification. I can filter out and find still around 13,000 models that are used for text classification. And usually what I do is just try out the top one. They're sorted by downloads. And as you can see, this top one has been downloaded about 10 million times. So usually what I do is I'm going to have a look at it. And I see some model details, and I see it's been trained on a data set called SST2, which is a data set for sentiment analysis. And within this model hub, I can even try it out myself here on the right-hand side. To make sure it does what I want it to do. I didn't like this movie. So if I compute that, it very quickly gives me some results and says with 98.7% probability, this was a negative review. If I say, I like this movie, it will come back with saying, okay, this is probably a positive comment. And exactly that functionality we can now do in our own code. So in order to copy this model or use this model, I can just press the copy button here, go back, and then paste it in here, which is exactly what I've done before. Now, if I execute this cell, it needs to download the model. Usually takes a few seconds. I've downloaded it beforehand in order to speed things up, but that's all there is. We now have a model at our fingertips, which we can use to classify customer reviews or text and find out the sentiment. So just like we did in the model hub that I showed you, I can now use this sentiment classifier and say, sentiment classifier, please classify me this piece of text. I thought the movie was great. I execute this cell, and it comes back with a positive score and a probability. How certain is this model that it is a positive score? 99.9% in this case. If I say, I thought the movie was okay, but too long, it will come back with a very high probability of the sentiment being negative, which is a bit harsh. But I guess at the end of this sentence will trigger the model to give it a negative sentiment score. And again, it's these two lines of codes that's all you need in order to use this model for your sentiment classification. Now, going on to the next topic, how can I extract information from a document? So the use case here is very similar to the one we've seen with Accenture, where they have a lot of legal documents, contracts, and they need to extract some information from that. You can think of it almost like a reading comprehension kind of exercise. You will give the model some context, could be an abstract, could be something around, we're going to use an example, something around the European Union. And then you can ask this model certain questions around that text that it just read and try to answer some of the questions. Now, for this one, we will need a different model because the first model that we downloaded is for sentiment classification. This one is a completely different task. So what we need this time is a Q&A model. And I can say again with this with this pipeline, the pipeline API gives us access to all of those models. So instead of text classification, I can also say question answering. Now I can even leave it like that. I don't even need to specify a model. If I don't specify a model, the pipeline API will choose one for me. Usually it will choose one very similar in the way that we did earlier manually. It will choose one that is very popular and that has been used many times. So in this case, I guess I haven't downloaded the model before. So in this case, now I'm downloading the model. As you can see, it's around 261 megabytes in size. But that was it again. Now we have a question answering model. And to demonstrate what that looks like is I'm going to provide an input text, which is around European Union law. So let me paste that in here. Okay, it is just in one one line. So let me quickly fix that. So you can see it's one paragraph about the European law, what it is, what it consists of. So this is going to be my input text. And now, because we downloaded a question answering model, we need a question to ask as well. Now, question in this case is going to be, what are the three main sources of European Union law? And now what we can do is we can take our question answering model and we provide the context. So we say, this is a paragraph I want you to read. And this is the question I want you to answer once you've read and understood what is in the paragraph. So if I execute this cell, it will come back with an answer, the answer being primary law, secondary law, and supplementary law. And if we look at the paragraph that we had here, yes, the three sources of European Union law are primary law, secondary law, and supplementary law. These Q&A models usually don't come just with one answer, although this one, the model has been quite confident on how correct the answer is with 86%. But if you're interested in learning more about the model's potential answer, you can even give it an additional parameter and say, give me the top three answers instead of just the top answer. And in this case, it comes back with very similar responses. So you will see that the first one and the second one are basically identical. The only difference is there's a full stop at the end of the second one. And the third one just is a subset of the second one. But for the third one already, it gives a 0.4% confidence. For the second one, a 1.8% confidence. So if you were to use a question answering model in your organization, you could set a certain threshold, for example. That's what we see a lot of customers do, and say, if the model is certain above a certain threshold of, say, 80%, then I will accept the answer. Otherwise, I will have a human review the output of the model. The third application I wanted to quickly show is just a straightforward translation. We all know that translation has become really good over the past few years using services like Google Translate, but it is very easy for organizations to use their own translation models as well. And again, just like we did before, we are going to use this pipeline API in order to, in this time, translate an English to German translation model. Again, I'm just going to specify the task. I'm not going to specify the particular model because I'm too lazy to go through the model hub and find me a model. I just tell the pipeline, find me a model for myself. And in this case, the model is quite a bit larger. 892 megabytes, so it's going to take a minute or so until it's been downloaded. But now that it has been downloaded, I can use it, and I can say, just like we did in the examples above, translate English to German, translate me, I wish you a Merry Christmas. All right, and for those in the audience that don't speak German, I can confirm that this is the correct translation. But we could even go a step further, right? And just like we have a translation machine from English to German, I mean, we can also just download a translation model that translates from German to English. Or maybe not. It's not providing any default models. Well, it shouldn't have to. Okay. Right. Let me see if I can fix that within a minute. Otherwise, we're going to move on. I'm going back to the model app. So the error message I got was like, for English to German, I know what like the default model is I should use. For German to English, I have no clue. You got to provide me the model that you want me to use. So I'm going back to the model hub, and in this case, I'm going to click translation. And within that, I'm just going to look for something that says DEN. All right, so it looks like I found a model that does translate from source language German to target language English. So let me quickly copy the name of the model, go back here and say, so now I told the pipeline API, I want you to do translation from German to English, and I want you to do it using this model. All right, now we can use this again. And we're just going to pop in the German translation that we got earlier from I wish you a Merry Christmas. Take this text, pop it in here. And then it comes back with the English text, I wish you a Merry Christmas. So these are 3 examples on how natural language processing can be used. There are other use cases and tasks where it is just as simple to get started by using this pipeline API. You have the pipeline API, you specify the task. Optionally, you specify the model you want to use. And within 2 lines of code, you can get started. It doesn't mean, the models are good enough in order for you to use in your organization in production. There are ways to improve the outputs of this model, but they're a little bit outside of the scope of our session today. Just looking at the time, I will quickly pop back to the slides, and I really want to conclude with looking at biases in natural language processing models. I think it's a very important topic. So we are done with the demos, and then I want to talk about the ethics and use in NLP and the biases that is inherent in these natural language processing models. So as I mentioned, NLP models are biased because the real world from which these models have learned are the real world is biased. And the way to see that is you can put into one of these models one of these models that is learned on something like mask filling. Mask filling is basically you give it a sentence, but you omit one word and you let the model guess what is that word. You can use the same sentence, but you can just say he is a blank and works in the hospital, and the model will then guess that what is that missing word? And if you use a male pronoun, it will guess something like doctor with a 65% confidence. Now, if you just were to change the pronoun in this task, and instead of saying he is, you would say she is, and let the model guess again, it will come back with a 66% probability of blank being a nurse instead of a doctor. In fact, doctor only has a 23% probability. Now, there's not much really what we can do around these biases other than, and that is really important, document the known biases in every open source natural language processing model, and make the consumers, the users, aware of these biases, so that when the users decide to use the model nonetheless, that they are still at least aware of these biases. Now, there are initiatives to do that. One is called the so-called model cards. So again, on the Model Hub, we saw there's almost 100,000 models available nowadays. And not every one of those models will have a model card, but the more popular ones that have been provided by research facilities might have one of those model cards. And these model cards, I'm just going to read what they are supposed to be doing. Model cards are files that accompany the models and provide hand information. Model cards are essentially for discoverability, reproducibility, and sharing. And in these model cards is also this is the point where researchers who provide these open source models are supposed to fill in their biases. Actually, can I just click on this one? Yeah, so this is the model that we just used, or at least seen in this example with the he is and she is. And if you scroll all the way down, they actually do a good job here. Let me see if I can find it. Limitations and bias, even if the training can have biased predictions. And then it says what it has been trained on as well. The bias will also affect all fine-tuned versions of this model. So basically, they're disclaiming that, yes, we know there's a bias in there, and that just basically means use at your own risk. Other initiatives try to assemble data sets and minimize the bias and limitations as much as possible. So there was a workshop called Big Science. And that workshop was a 1-year-long workshop, a collaboration between several research facilities getting together. And during the workshop, they basically investigated and compiled a data set where they tried to minimize, you can never remove these biases, but they tried to minimize several bias, investigate the social impacts and the capabilities and so on for these models. Links are all in the in these slides. And with that, I will skip over the last part of the presentation. I would encourage you to try out ChatGPT for yourself if it's still available. It's in a demo, in a beta state. Yeah, it seems still available. It is a language model, basically a chatbot, like you would be used to from like smart assistants like Alexa and Siri, but it's quite a bit more powerful. It comes with its own problems, but that might be for another session that we could dive deeper into that. So that's it, really. If you want to get in touch, if you're interested about natural language processing, again, we have a meetup platform, NLP London. We host events roughly every 4 to 6 weeks. Actually, tonight we have another event. We get together, we share some insights, some knowledge around natural language processing, and it's a good way to meet people as well. All the meetups are in person. And if you want to reach out on LinkedIn, and ask me more questions, please do. But for now, we have some time for question and answer right here.